Welcome back to our garden. Just harvesting some of these broccoli shoots that have formed, or as we call them, calabrese. And it's a good thing if you can leave them in the ground for a little while, they will actually start sprouting little shoots, and you can get yourself a nice bit of veg just to go with the evening meal. Normally during the summer months I don't let them do that because I need the room, but we have other plans for this bed, so nothing else is going to go into plot 5. Now, I've been asked by one or two people if we could just talk a little bit about onions. So today's video shall be all about the allium family. So the alliums, well, we first started sowing our onions all the way back in mid-January, around about the 20th of the month. And they went out into our plots around about the 20th of March. You don't have to sow your onion seeds then, you can sow them, some people sow them earlier. You can actually sow them a bit later than that. But we have limited space within the plots, and what we do want to do is to get a second crop in. So actually for us, we've found that by sowing mid-January and planting out in March, that the onions are going to be ready around about this time of the year. As for spring onions or salad onions, however you know them, we look to begin sowing late February, and then we sow month after month, probably 10 modules, and we multi-sow them, as you can see here. There's several in here, and these are probably 2 months old now, aren't they?
Yes.
From when they were sown, although they've been in this bed now. Yeah, they've been in this bed here for about a month now, so they're not going to be long before they're ready. And sometime this week we shall sow the next lot of spring onions, so that we have the spring onions ready for us to eat during the month of September. Then of course there's the shallots. Now shallots, and indeed garlic, we plant those from sets in the main, and they go into the ground any time between late September to mid-October. And indeed you can plant, some people say you plant your shallots on the shortest day of the year and you harvest them on the longest day of the year. So there's quite a big window when it comes to planting the shallots and the garlic. You could be planting them in November or December, but for us they're planted any time towards the end of September to mid-October. Again, to give us the harvest that we want. You saw us harvest our garlic a few videos back, and that's out of the ground now. And actually, if Mrs. W just turns around, you can see where the garlic came out of the ground. We now have in there brassicas, the swede, and the brassicas that we shall eat for the month of October. So that's why when we say when we're sowing them, we sow them for those reasons, because we want to ensure that the bed is free back end of June and into July, when we can get our second plantings in. One of the questions I get asked quite a lot is, when are my onions ready to harvest? Now, some people will say that as the leaves begin to go over, you push the rest over. Now, I have done that in the past. I don't do that anymore, because I find that that breaks the stalk and that can lead to disease. It's also said that you harvest your onions once all the leaves have gone brown and have fallen over. I don't do that. Now, you can see down here this cluster of onions, the leaves have gone over naturally. I haven't pushed those over. So for me, they're actually, I can harvest those now, if I so wish, and I shall be. But actually, it's a really great way while we're just here. If you look here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of medium-sized onions. And if you look at this one here, which is quite a large onion, because only one came up, look how many onions we get in this space compared to that space. And that's exactly why we prefer to multi-sow our onions. And of course, there is only myself and Mrs. W, so we prefer to have a slightly medium-sized onion rather than a very large one. Not that there's anything wrong with growing large onions if that floats your boat. It's just what we prefer. This is a bunch of 4 onions, and as I say, they're multi-sown. You can see the sort of size onions that we get. Quite nice sized onions. And then for these, we know we've got some people coming, so we're going to be needing these onions, and we're going to eat those green, and that's something you can do. And all green onions mean is that you've not cured them. So we're not going to store them, we're going to eat them just the way they are. You can see here the Zabroon shallots, and these are some that we grew from seed because I couldn't get hold of any sets. You see they're getting quite large, so I'm actually really quite looking forward to them. They're not due for a harvest until sort of August time, so they're going to be giants. And the idea is that we want to save half of these to then replant back end of September, and hopefully they'll then split in exactly the same way as the other shallots that we grow. You can see in plot 4, bed 3, that we also have the red onions in here. And everything is coming along really nicely. They're starting to get to the point where they're ready to harvest. Up this end they're starting to fall over, but down this end they're still quite lush. So they're really where I want them to be, so that our onions are harvested by the end of July. Now under here you can see that this is where we do all the curing of the alliums. So the garlic have been here for a couple of weeks now, because clearly we harvested that a couple of weeks ago, and skin is starting to become crispy and the necks are drying off. And it takes about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on weather conditions, as to when alliums actually do cure and that they are ready to be able to go into storage. And here, these are what we have to eat. And there's the best part of 100 shallots in there. And I've taken out the ones that we actually want to save for our seed. These are the Longor that we grew. And you can see when they cure, the tops are drying off. And that's what you want to do. That's all the part of the curing process, that you want the water not to be in the top here. You don't want to be moist. And you can see the top part of the plant has gotten like that. It's still got a little bit more to go before this top part of the shallot becomes like it. But essentially, by the time it's finished, this piece down here will be all flollopy, just like this piece.
Crispy.
These are the Jamour bulbs that we saved. And there's 20 of each in there. And we should be saving 20 of the brune bulbs. So if you think about it, and this is where shallots really come into play, that's 60 times on average 5 bulbs that sprout from that one set. And in lots of cases we get more. We generally get 6, 7 or 8, don't we?
Yeah.
But if you say on average 5 times 60, that's the amount of bulbs you get. And then you can have those to eat. They store better than onions, by the way, shallots do. And the very first thing I do is to take the ones out that I feel are going to give us the best return when we replant them later on this year. I tend to go for the biggest bulbs because I think the genes that have been passed on from year to year, they're getting used to growing in our soil. And it's what we've done with these Jamour. I haven't bought Jamour bulbs for 5 years or more. The Longlor, of course, are new. They were new to us this year, so I did have to buy those sets. But I won't be buying any this year. I have my sets. I've set those aside, forgive the pun, and that's what we have to eat. The best part of 100 shallots. And as for garlic, we have many, many garlics. We have been using some green and not letting them cure, and you can see that the elephant garlic is curing nicely. Hopefully you can hear the crispiness. I know that this weekend Mrs. W wants to get round to planting these bulbils. But we're going to try the elephant garlic, and the other one we're going to keep the cloves and replant those in the autumn later on this year.
This year was the first year we've ever grown it, isn't it? So
it is, yes.
And we did only have 2 cloves that we planted.
Yeah, so just 2 cloves. And I don't know how many cloves will be in this, but if there's 6, we'll get 6 new plants. Now we choose to cure ours here. This is where Mrs. W's put a roof over the compost bays, because that keeps the rain off them. You don't really want them to get really wet. The odd shower is not going to hurt them, but if you know you're going to get quite a bit of rain, and at the moment our weather over the next week or so, certainly, we see thunderstorms, heavy downpours of rain, that won't do those any good whatsoever, and you'll have to start the whole process all over again. Also, by putting them in these sort of crates so that they're not overloaded, they have plenty of air space in order that the air can circulate around them and they don't rot. We learnt one year, didn't we, Mrs. W, through bitter experience, and I don't want you guys to suffer in the same way. You will hear people say you can put them in your greenhouse.
Oh, yeah, we had a terrible...
We put ours in there one year and it got so hot, I went up there one day and we had fried onions without frying them.
They had sort of semi-cooked and they all...
They had, hadn't they?
Went awful, didn't they, yeah.
So, if you're going to put them in your greenhouse, make sure it's not one of those hot years that we get like last year, because they will cook and you won't be able to store them. It's far better if you can keep them outside under cover, or of course if you live in a drier climate, you can just leave them on the soil and they'll cure very happily there. Now, if you're a follower of our channel, you'll know that we grew some spring onions in the greenhouse. It's part of a trial last year because we'd never grown anything in our greenhouse to overwinter before, and they were one of the things that were a real good success. We had them nice and early. We were eating spring onions at the beginning of April, and it's so wonderful to have that fresh oniony taste at that time of the year. They were ready long before the ones outside. It's going to be sort of back end of May before the ones that you plant outside are ready. And it just goes to show you what a great family the alliums are. and a good vegetable to grow. You could have the onion taste all year round by using spring onions, overwintering them so that you get them earlier. Regardless whether you have a greenhouse, they can be sown in August, planted out September to overwinter, and you will get a very early crop of spring onions sometime toward the end of April, beginning of May the following year. And then of course it's all those onions and shallots that you're going to cure so that you can put them into storage and use them just as you want them. We've got close on 400 onions that we need to harvest over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Cure them, get them into storage, so we've got plenty of onions. And then of course, we've got shallots we can mix in with them, but we tend to try to leave those until into the new year, because shallots actually I find store longer than onions. And I think we had our last shallot, I think I'm right in saying, Mrs. W, the beginning of May.
May, yeah.
Yeah. So it goes to show you, if you can store them properly, cure them properly and store them properly, you know, you really can be enjoying that lovely taste of onion. And then of course, there are those lovely leeks, which we put in to plot 3. There are 80 leeks in there, and we can use that for a lovely oniony taste. So we're not reliant on onions all of the time, or shallots. We can have different oniony tastes. So if you haven't done so before, do give the allium family a try. They really are worth growing. And if you multi-sow like we do, you get a lot more in the space that you're going to grow them in. If you have been growing your onions this year, do let us know in the comments below how they're getting on. Are yours ready for a harvest, or did you plant yours a little later? Do share all your experiences down there below in the comments. We do love to read your comments, and I do try to answer every one of them. Maybe not on the day you post it, but at some point I will answer it. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet and you're thinking about it, then please do so. We would love you to be a part of our journey in this No Dig garden here in Norfolk. Have a great gardening week. We shall see you on the next one.